You guys have a pretty dynamite pastor. Can we give it up for Josh one time? He's a special guy, and the Lord is doing things in him and through the church, and we're excited. We're excited to be here. We're going to get situated here. So when you get a guest preacher in, somebody that's going to share a little bit, you always want to get to know them beforehand, right? So I have a van. You know, that's exciting, right? And in fun fact, I have a Dodge, which is just like Josh's, which is like, we went to lunch a couple weeks ago, and there was like 4 of us, and they all had the same van. It was fun. But you know you're an adult when you get a minivan, and that's awesome. But we had a van. We actually had, not only are we adults with a van, we're adults with our second van. Our first van, we had been kind of like delaying. We were like, it's cheap, it's here. You know, we don't want to go and upgrade. And we were kind of delaying some maintenance work on it because it was old. And we went to the mechanic to get brakes fixed up. And our mechanic, the guy that tells you hey, you need to fix this and pay me money so I can fix it for you, told me, yeah, you need a new van. Wait a second, you're not going to fix it. He's like, no, just get rid of it, get a new van. So we went to the car lot, right? And there's nobody in here. Is anybody in here a used car salesman? Okay, we're safe. Okay, good. Because this wrecks the whole thing if there's not. So we went to the car lot, and you ever go to you know what I mean when you drive up to the car lot and the guy comes out and you're like, we're just shopping, we're just looking around, just checking stuff out. And he's like, well, what can I help you? No, we're just looking. No, I need a van, but I'm not going to tell you I need a van because then all the power's in your hands, and I want to know what's going on. So we ended up at the moment we're like, you know what, we're getting rid of our van. We're going to be the cool parents and have an SUV. And we ended up with another van, which is exciting. But my point of that is today, okay? Guest preacher, Josh will be back next week. Thank the Lord, right? But today I feel, and I've been praying about this service, and I've been praying about what does God have for all of us. And in this moment, let's not window shop, but let's actually say, hey, listen, we're going to get something from the Lord today. And I feel like God's got something for all of us. And we'll share, and foreshadowing, I will tell you a story about Josh today. And you guys are always excited. And now that he knows the story, it's not so nerve-wracking for him, because I think he spent the entire service a little bit restless because of the stories that I have. But I promise it'll be good. But we're gonna take just a minute today and let God do something in our hearts today. So can we do this? Can we bow our heads in prayer? Lord, thank you. I thank you for everyone that's in this room right now. I thank you for your Spirit being here in such a unique way. Your Spirit being here in a way that we can feel it. We know your presence is here, and we know that you love us, and you've created us for a purpose. And Lord, we thank you and we praise you in your name. Amen. So I was a youth pastor for a lot of years. And as a youth pastor, you're always required to have these clever titles and these clever things and, unique things like everything rhymes or something like that. It's not today, sorry. Today, the main focus of today is really captured in our title, The Calling. Ta-da, yay. So we're going to be in Acts chapter 9. I know you guys have been in the book of Exodus and you're walking through the book of Exodus, so we're going to take a brief week here out of the book of Exodus, and we'll be in Acts chapter 9. And Acts chapter 9 is a unique perspective, because if you've read through the book of Acts, this is a pretty transformational point. We have a man named Saul, who, if you reverse 2 chapters, he was the reason Stephen was stoned. So Stephen, martyr in the Bible for the Christian faith, big moment in the Christian church. And then in chapter 8, Saul goes out and he persecutes the church, and the church scatters. And this is the Christian church as we know it in its infant stage. And Saul is this big advocate to destroy what's going on. So we look at him as kind of a bad guy right here. He's destroying what Jesus died for. He's destroying for what's going on. And so Acts chapter 9, starting in verse 1, says, "Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found anyone there belonging to the way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed all around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, 'Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?' 'Who are you, Lord?' Saul asked. 'I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting,' he replied. 'Now get up and go to the city, and you will be told what you must do.' The men traveling with Saul stood there speechless. They heard the sounds, but they did not see anyone. Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand into Damascus. For 3 days he was blind. He did not eat or drink anything." See, we have this interaction here with Saul as the moment in the transformational time when Saul becomes Paul, and the whole church is changed because of this moment. But we look at it as like Saul's a bad guy. See, as Saul was persecuting the church because he believed the church was preaching heresy. In the Jewish faith at that time, Saul was fulfilling the obligations of the law of the Old Testament in his mind. Saul did what he thought was good, even though he was wrong. He was a very, very highly educated, perfect storm of a scholar, because he was a Roman citizen, he was a Jew, and he was very well educated with the Greeks. So he could talk to any crowd and have influence. And as that, he went to the high priest. He went to the leaders, the highly, highly authoritative leaders of the Jewish faith, and asked for letters to go imprison Christians. We have a unique perspective of who Saul was. And Saul, driving forward, went to those leaders, and as he was on his way to fulfill his mission of what he thought was good, of what he thought was right, Jesus came and knocked him down. Boom. He fell to the ground. Jesus came and appeared to him and said, "Saul, stop it. You're not doing things right." And I think sometimes we like the idea of Saul, with this big transformation. We're like, yeah, I want Jesus to come down. We'll talk face to face. This will be cool, right? Like Jesus and we're going to be best friends, and I'll see him. But Saul had a purpose because of the actions that he was doing in the beginning. He may not have been right in his actions, but he was pursuing with all his heart, zealously, for what he thought God wanted him to do. So we have this character, right? First character. Acts chapter 9, Saul. Bad guy turned into a good guy because of Jesus. But we also go into this, and we have a second character, and it starts in with Acts chapter 9, verse 10, of this secondary character. And a lot of times we miss this part of this story. And if you've read the story, you know where we're going. But Saul is where everybody focuses on. Everybody loves the idea of I'm going to go do great things, and we want to have that. But what about real people? What about the people of life? Acts chapter 9, verse 10. It says, "In Damascus, there was a disciple named Ananias. The Lord called to him in a vision, Ananias. Yes, Lord, he answered. The Lord told him, go to the house of Judas on Straight Street and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul, for he is praying. In a vision, he has seen a man named Ananias come and place his hands on him and restore his sight. Lord, Ananias answered, I have heard many reports about this man and the harm he has done to your holy people in Jerusalem. And he has come here with authority from the chief priests to arrest all who call on your name. But the Lord said to Ananias, go, for this man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. See, we have second character Ananias, right? I think a lot of us can relate when we get down to it a lot more like Ananias than we can Paul. Ananias is just an ordinary guy. Ananias was a disciple, church member, part of the body, not authority, wasn't a leader, just a guy that wanted to follow God, lived out his life loving Jesus. So Jesus comes to him in a vision and says, Ananias, ta-da, here, Jesus. Again, we're not talking a dream. We're not talking like he was asleep and God gave him a dream and he woke up and he's like, I know what I need to do. That can happen, but that's not what happened. Jesus came, he was awake, he talked to Ananias. And he said, Ananias, I have something special for you to do. There's a guy, you know him, he's killing people like you. He's putting people in prison just like you. I want you to go pray for him. And Ananias goes, pass. Next. Try again. What? I don't want to do that. You think like, Ananias, I'm going to go, he's blind right now. He can't see you. You're going to go pray for him so he can see you better. The logic just isn't there, is it? But Jesus says, no. I want you to go. See, I think Ananias looks at his current circumstance and he goes, for me to live out my faith, I have to take all the risks. What do I get out of this? What do I get out of this? Like, where do I fit in? And sometimes I think God asks us to do things and we're like, God, I don't want to do that. Do you know how much that's gonna put a risk? That's gonna put something on me. That's gonna challenge me. That's gonna hurt. He risked literal death, imprisonment, pain, to go meet with a Jewish leader who is blind and help him see. Sometimes I think God calls us to things that are way outside of our comfort zone, way outside of what makes us feel safe. You know, I was a youth pastor for the better part of a decade, and we were in a good church, and we loved what we were doing. We were, working hard. We had just bought a movie theater. Our church was growing, and we bought a movie theater, and we had moved in there, and it was awesome. We were having fun. Like, everything was good, right? Like, I preached in, we had a movie screen, and then we could watch movies afterwards. It was awesome. And we felt like God was calling us out. Like, God, what do you want me to do? Okay, things are good. We love this. We're having a good time. God, what do you want me to do? He said, I want you to quit. Like, what do you mean you want me to quit? You want me to quit what I'm doing? I'm like, I'm serving you. And I think Ananias, when he's like, Jesus, didn't you know, like, you want me to go pray for him, but he's hurting your people. You want me to go pray for him, or you want me to kick him? Like, which one do you want me to do for real? Like, I can help you out here. And we're in that same boat. We're like, God, we're doing your work. What do you want us to do? And he was quiet. Like where do we go? What do we do? And I met with our pastor, and I was like, hey, I'm supposed to leave. Where do you want to go? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. God just says we should leave. We should step down. We stayed at the church, but that was it. So I'm going from being a pastor and like, yeah, I have an identity wrapped up in what I'm doing. I have an identity that says I am a pastor. I am serving the Lord and I'm doing the right thing. Do you ever have an identity wrapped up in your job? Like who you are is all wrapped up in that. At the same time, my wife was like a couple months pregnant. So now not only am I'm leaving a job, I have to figure out what I'm going to do to support my family. Also, I'm losing insurance. I got to figure out how to pay for a baby to come into the world. All of this wraps up. And then on that note, we go in for our like ultrasound. You know, like everything now is on Facebook is all about like gender reveals, and you pop a balloon and it comes out pink or blue, and like, hooray, like this is fun. So we go into the ultrasound to figure out if we're having a baby and what it's going to be and all those kinds of things. And we found out that there wasn't a heartbeat. You know, we're almost 20 weeks into a 40 weeks. We're halfway through this pregnancy, and we found out that we lost the baby. So we had to go to the hospital and deliver a baby that wasn't coming home with us. We're like, God, I served you. I was faithful. You called me out, and then you took our baby. Man, that stinks. So we said, God, what do you want from us? We're heartbroken. What do you want from us? He says, I want you to try again. So we're like, all right, we'll do it. So we went back and went back to the doctor a few months later, and we're like, hey, you're going to have another baby. Everything's healthy. Fun fact, at the first, there's two ultrasounds. You have one at 13 weeks. You have one at 20 weeks. At 13 weeks, if you have a healthy baby at 13 weeks, you have like a 98% chance of having a healthy baby through a pregnancy. We lost the first one. We're like, all right, this is good. We're good. We're going to do it. Went back to the second ultrasound. For a second time in a row, we lost the baby. Completely healthy, no reason, just lost the baby. So now we're like, God, like, what do you do in those situations? What do you do? What do you do when you have what you feel like is God's calling and you have to risk everything? You have to risk all of it for what? And God's saying, go. Do it. Ananias walks up into this room where Paul's sitting blind, and he's like, oh gosh, what am I supposed to do here? He already tried to talk Jesus out of saying, seriously, Jesus, can you just, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. Have you ever prayed that prayer before? God, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this anymore. We keep going. In Acts chapter 9 still, verse 17. After he convinced him to go, this is what Ananias went to the house and entered it. Placing his hands on Saul, he said, Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on the road as you were coming here, has sent me that you may see again and be filled with the Holy Spirit. Immediately, something like scales fell off of Saul's eyes, and he could see again. He got up and was baptized. And after taking some food, he regained his strength. See, sometimes we have that calling in this moment. It's one verse away. We act like sometimes it's so hard to grasp because in the Bible, it's like you read it and you can read it in one sitting, but sometimes those moments for us seem like they take decades. God, what do you want from me? And he says one thing and then he's quiet and you're like, where do I go? What do I do? You look at your life and you're like, maybe you're you're a young married couple, or maybe you're post-retirement. And we ask God, what do you want from us right now? Because God's got a moment for each of us right now. See, our story, thank the Lord, our story didn't end with that. Because we were heartbroken. We were devastated. What do we do? What do you want from us? Where does that leave us? Because God, I don't want to just be somebody. I want to be used. I want you to use me. And sometimes I think that's a dangerous prayer because that means suffering. That means challenges. That means pain. But what does God want from us? See, fast forward a couple years into our story, and I was standing in church during worship. I was like, you know what, God? I give up. Do whatever. And I never, you walk through those valleys, those seasons where God just breaks you down. And maybe you're in one of those moments right now. Maybe you're not, but they're coming. They always will come. Because those are the moments that God uses to get us into the path that he wants us to be on, to do the most influence in our world. Ananias walked up to a room and he opened the door, and I always imagine like those funny moments that like the Bible doesn't really say, and like he was tempted to just like pray, push him over and run. Like I don't want him to see who I am, so I'm just going to be healed and go. Like boom, I'm gone. But he goes in and he prays for him and he sees, and that transformed the entire Christian faith. That guy kneeled down, would suffer more than any of us could ever imagine. And it was because Ananias prayed for him. That moment was used to confirm in Paul's life what he was going to do. So where does that leave us? October of last year. A year ago today, it was a year ago, the beginning of the month. I was standing in church and I said, God, I give up. We had been touring at that time, like, God, what do you want? Do you want us to go back into ministry? Like, is that where we're supposed to be? You gave us this season of struggle, right? We went through that. I feel like this is it. And I raised my hands, and God said, I have not forgotten you. As clear as he's ever spoken to me before. I have not forgotten you. It's your time. It's time to go. It's time to get back. So I did at that moment, well, not at that moment because we were still in church, but right after church, I did the only rational thing that a good young man serving the Lord would do, and I called my mother. Right? Right? That's what you do, right? So I called my mom. My mom's a pastor. I called her, and she's like 3 octaves above where I could hear, was shouting, hooray, yay, go. It's about time. We just felt like we had that season because God had set us out for that season, and we're coming back, right? So she then reminds me of a moment that was super impactful now, not then, in my life. Because as a freshman in college, she called me. She said, Eric, I have a word for you, but it's not fun. I'm like, my mom always gives me words. She's like, did you clean your room? How are your grades? I'm paying for this, But she gave me a word, and it's out of the book of Luke, and it's at the Last Supper, and Jesus is talking to Simon Peter, and he says, Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift you like wheat. But I pray for your strength, that when you return, you will strengthen your brothers. And at the moment, as a 20-year-old kid, I'm like, click. I didn't hang up on my mother. But I was like, I don't want that. That is awful. Satan has asked to sift you like wheat. Like, I didn't understand what it meant to go through a challenge. But I wanted to serve the Lord with everything I had. So when I returned, I'm equipped to serve and influence and impact a community. We don't understand, and I didn't understand, what it meant to serve the Lord without struggle. You understand through struggle what the Lord is calling you to do. So where does that leave us? Okay? Where do we go from here, right? You hear my story, Al, your life, you had some rough years, I don't want us to leave at just that moment, but God has really struck me with like the thoughts of today to kind of land in three areas. How we live. And in the season of transition, we're in this special moment because as New Life looks to bring on a secondary location, and where Church of New Hope looks to come aboard, and all of these transitions are happening, where does that leave us? And I think as a congregation, we have an obligation, an opportunity to expand our faith and expand how we live and how we operate. So our thoughts for the day, how we live our lives. We live by faith. We live by faith. And what does that mean? It means that as we live our lives, you won't be able to explain why you do the things you do. Living by faith means you're not going to be able to go, this is why I'm doing things because it makes sense, and this is this and this and this. Living by faith means stepping out and doing something audacious. Living by faith means not being able to just have clear-cut, clean path. Living by faith is our continual actions daily to serve the Lord. Living by faith means daily we continue to serve and continue to work for the kingdom. But it also takes risk. Living by faith is risky. We risk everything when we live by faith. Because when we looked at that verse 16 says, Jesus tells Ananias, no, Ananias, you're going to go pray for him. I'm going to show him how much he's going to suffer for me. Living by faith takes risk. Risk of pain, risk of suffering, risk of challenge, because it is our obligation to serve the Lord. But what else? It takes living by faith, but it also takes living by the Spirit. And I think sometimes we can mix these up, like living by faith means living by the Spirit, and they do. They're very similar, but I think that living by the Spirit is a little more. Because Acts chapter 1:8 says that I will give you the Spirit, and the Spirit will give you power. Will give you power to live. So if faith is the motivation, living by the Spirit is the power that comes alongside and gets us going and keeps us in the right track. See, I told you I was going to tell you a story about Josh. My first memory of Josh, your pastor, we were in school, and we had these I was a freshman, fresh out of high school. I went to a public high school. I didn't know why that you would pray during school, or we're secular school, right? So I went to Bible college, and we had the first day of classes, we had an all-campus prayer night. It's we're just gonna go somewhere and pray? Are we going to be in our rooms and pray? Like, I didn't know these things. So I was started in my room and I was praying and I was like, God, do stuff. And I was like excited. I was like confused, like, because I grew up in Northeast Ohio and went all the way to Missouri with no one I knew and all these. And I'm like, cool, like, what am I supposed to do? So I started praying. So I got out of my room and I walked. We had like a long hallway with the dorms on the side, and there was a middle breezeway, and there was a prayer room right off the breezeway. And I remember vividly coming out of the hall, down the hall, and out of the prayer room around the corner is Josh, praying passionately, weeping, and praying in the Spirit. Do you know that your pastor lives by the Spirit? Your pastor prays by the Spirit. And that moment struck me because there are men in this school that I can learn from and that I can grow with, and this is it. Changed my life. It's a moment because of your pastor. So, we live by the Spirit. We live by faith. And then the last one we're going to wrap up today with is we live by our calling. We live by our calling. You're created for a purpose. Did you know that? You are created for a purpose. Each one of us was created by God to be in this moment, to do special things. And we look at Ananias and we look at Paul and we say, you know what? This is great. What am I supposed to do? Both of them, Paul and Ananias, had moments where continually they served God. Paul did his best as Saul to serve God. He just didn't have all the pieces in place. And once the pieces were in place, he was off to the races. But it was the continual action day by day by day that he did what he could and he pushed forward. Ananias, we talk of Ananias in chapter 22, that Ananias was well thought of by the Jews. Paul quotes his interaction again. And he says Ananias was well thought of by the Jews. Why? Because Ananias lived continually and faithful. He lived by the Spirit. But he was called to one thing, to go and pray for Paul. And maybe our calling is grand, maybe our calling is not so grand, but maybe we as a congregation, a lot of times as adults, we get like more proper and, the Lord calls me to be me, and we don't continually seek after what God is calling us to do. Maybe God is calling us to big things. Maybe God is calling us just simply, Matthew 28:19, to go and make disciples. Go and influence, go and impact the community. Maybe God is calling us from 1 John 2:6, that if we claim to be a Christian, if we claim to follow Jesus, that we better walk that same way. Maybe God is calling us to bigger things. Maybe God is calling us very specifically to you right now, that you are to go do something great. Maybe he's calling you to go, hey, listen, you're going to risk everything, okay? This is going to be awful and painful. You might die, but it'll be worth it in the end, I promise. Or maybe he doesn't even say it's worth it in the end. He just says, hey, listen, go. To Ananias, he said, listen, this is it. This is all you have to do. You go and pray for him. And he goes, I don't want to. He says, no, listen. You go and pray for him. I'll take care of the rest. See, it's our job to just be faithful in the calling, and Jesus will make the impact. It's our job to just do what we're told. God's going to do great things in us and through us. Dan, can I get you to come up here? So we're going to close today. I'm going to wrap things up. Where do we land? Who is this? What is this that we're supposed to do? You know, we came off a few weeks ago of an all-church prayer and fasting. You know, maybe God is calling us through things like that to do something specific, big, small, insignificant in our mind or very significant. Because a lot of times we say, you know what, I want to do something powerful. But we don't know what risks are involved, or we don't know what happens. Maybe it's just simply that most of us are called to that one small thing. That one small thing. Ananias was called to pray for one person, and it transformed the entire world. One small thing. Maybe God is calling us right now to one small thing. Can we do this? Can you bow your heads with me? We're going to take a moment here. As Dan leads, take a moment to just reflect on what the Lord is doing. Take a moment to just maybe sit in His presence. Maybe you know that God is speaking to you and you have something in your life that God has called you to do. Maybe it's reconnect with a family member. Maybe it's reconnect with the Lord. Maybe it's continually living out your faith, living by the Spirit. Maybe it's living by your calling. Maybe God's called you now or many years ago to something. The Lord can speak to you. So we're going to take just a moment in His presence. Reflect on what the Lord is doing.